The first scream came from first class, then another. Then the plane dropped so violently that drinks exploded into the ceiling. Luggage burst from overhead bins, and terrified passengers grabbed strangers as the aircraft tilted toward the ocean. Inside the cockpit, both pilots were unconscious. And the only person still moving toward the controls was a poor 13-year-old black boy who had never been on an airplane in his life. The flight attendant stared at him in disbelief as warning alarms screamed through the cockpit, and the nose of the plane pointed toward certain death. What happened next would leave an entire nation speechless. Before we begin, if you believe kindness can come from the most unexpected people and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories that restore faith in humanity. Malik Carter grew up in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Atlanta, where sirens often replaced lullabies and broken streetlights made the nights feel longer than they should. His mother, Denise, worked double shifts cleaning office buildings downtown, while his grandmother raised him during the hours his mother was gone. They lived in a tiny apartment where the ceiling leaked whenever it rained, and some nights dinner was whatever food remained in the refrigerator. But despite the hardships, Malik had something rare. He had wonder. Every evening, he climbed onto the roof of his apartment building and stared at planes crossing the sky. While other kids played basketball or got caught in neighborhood trouble, Malik sat with an old notebook and sketched airplanes. He memorized their shapes, their engines, their wings, their sounds. He knew the difference between commercial jets and cargo planes simply by looking at them. When planes flew overhead, Malik would whisper their names like prayers. His grandmother often found him staring into the sky. She would smile and tell him that God places dreams in the hearts of people for a reason. But dreams felt expensive, and poverty made dreams feel impossible. Malik's school lacked resources. Their science lab barely functioned. Their computers were outdated. His classmates laughed when he said he wanted to become a pilot someday. A pilot? Kids from neighborhoods like theirs didn't become pilots. They became statistics. At least that's what everyone kept telling him. One day, he met an elderly man named Mr. Raymond at a junkyard where Malik collected scrap electronics. Mr. Raymond had once worked as an aircraft mechanic decades earlier before retirement. When he noticed Malik studying old aircraft manuals thrown away in a scrap pile, he became curious. Soon, the two formed an unlikely friendship. Every weekend, Malik visited Mr. Raymond's garage where old airplane parts hung from walls like museum relics. Mr. Raymond taught him how engines worked, how altitude affected pressure, how pilots communicated with control towers, how emergency systems functioned. Though Malik had never touched a real aircraft, he absorbed every lesson like his life depended on it. Neither of them knew how true that would become. Years later, Malik won a scholarship to attend a national youth science competition in Los Angeles after building a flight simulator using discarded gaming parts and recycled computer screens. It was the biggest opportunity of his life. But there was one problem. He had never been on a plane before. No. The scholarship covered the ticket. His mother cried when she handed him his suitcase. His grandmother hugged him tightly and reminded him that miracles often begin with fear. Malik boarded Flight 728 nervous but excited. He stared in awe at everything: the seats, the cabin lights, the engines outside his window. He silently thanked God. Halfway through the flight, disaster struck. Passengers suddenly noticed unusual turbulence. The aircraft shook violently. Then came a strange silence. The engines still roared, but something felt wrong. A flight attendant rushed toward the cockpit after repeated calls went unanswered. When she opened the cockpit door, she screamed. The captain was slumped over his controls. The co-pilot had collapsed beside him. Both men were unconscious after suffering severe food poisoning from contaminated airport meals they had eaten before boarding. The plane began descending rapidly. Panic spread instantly. Passengers cried. Parents shielded children. People sent goodbye messages. The flight attendant, Emily, tried desperately contacting air traffic control, but she was shaking uncontrollably. Then she noticed Malik standing near the cockpit. He looked terrified, but focused. He stared at the instrument panel. Something felt familiar. The controls resembled simulations he had practiced hundreds of times using his homemade setup. Emily screamed for help. Malik stepped forward. At first, nobody believed him. He was just a kid, a frightened boy from economy class wearing secondhand sneakers. But no one else knew what to do. And time was running out. Malik strapped himself into the captain's seat. His hands trembled. Thousands of lives rested on his shoulders. Air traffic control finally responded. The controller's voice was calm but urgent. He asked who was flying. When Malik answered, silence filled the radio. Then disbelief. Then instructions. Malik fought tears as warning alarms screamed. He remembered Mr. Raymond's lessons. Stay calm. Trust your training. One step at a time. The plane was losing altitude quickly over the Pacific. Malik adjusted thrust, corrected the pitch, stabilized the wings. Passengers felt the plane level slightly. People began praying harder. Emily stayed beside him, crying as she relayed instructions. Malik's breathing became heavier. His hands cramped from gripping the controls. Every second felt eternal. Storm clouds formed ahead. Lightning flashed. Foreign. Rain slammed into the windshield. Visibility vanished. Air traffic control directed Malik toward an emergency landing route at a military airfield. But reaching it meant flying through brutal weather. Malik wanted to quit. He wanted his mother. He wanted his grandmother. He wanted his grandma. He wanted to wake up from what felt like a nightmare. Then he remembered his grandmother's words. God places dreams in hearts for a reason. He pushed forward. The runway lights finally appeared through the storm. But the landing gear malfunctioned. Another alarm screamed. Another alarm screamed. Passengers began sobbing again. Malik's heart nearly stopped. He had to manually deploy the landing gear. Emily followed emergency instructions from a manual while Malik maintained altitude. After what felt like forever, the landing gear locked into place. One final challenge remained. Landing. The hardest part, Malik's hands were slick with sweat. The runway looked impossibly small. Air traffic control guided him carefully. Too fast. Slow down. Too low. Pull up. Steady, 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 steady. The aircraft slammed onto the runway. Tires exploded. Smoke covered the windows. Oh, passengers screamed one final time. Then the plane stopped. Silence. Pure silence. Then crying. Then cheering. Then prayers of gratitude. 127 passengers survived. Emergency crews rushed on board. When they discovered the pilot was a 13-year-old boy, hardened first responders broke down in tears. News spread worldwide overnight. A boy saves plane. A teen hero defies impossible odds. A miracle at 30,000 feet. But Malik's real battle had only begun. Fame brought attention to his family's poverty. Reporters discovered his mother was behind on rent. His grandmother needed medical treatment they couldn't afford. Their apartment building had mold and structural damage. For the first time, the world saw how a hero had been living. People responded. Donations poured in. Aviation schools offered scholarships. Airlines invited him to visit training centers. Mr. Raymond watched the news from home and cried with pride. The boy everyone underestimated had saved lives because someone once believed in him. Months later, Malik was invited to the White House. He stood in a tailored suit, nervous but proud. He looked at his mother in the audience. She was crying again. But this time they were tears of joy. Malik received a National Bravery Award, yet his speech stunned everyone. He didn't talk about heroism. He talked about forgotten children. He spoke about poverty. About dreams trapped in neighborhoods where talent dies every day because nobody invests in kids. He said there were thousands of children just like him waiting for one opportunity. The room stood in thunderous applause. Soon after, major aviation companies funded STEM programs in low-income communities inspired by his story. Mr. Raymond's garage was turned into a youth learning center. Children filled it every weekend. Learning, dreaming, believing. Malik eventually became a licensed pilot years later. And every time he flew, he visited passengers before takeoff. He reminded nervous travelers that fear can become strength, pain can become purpose, and impossible dreams can change lives. But before we finish this story, commented dreams have no limits if you believe someone's background should never define their future. And if this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories that remind us that heroes can come from anywhere. On the anniversary of the emergency landing, Malik visited the now-retired flight attendant Emily. She handed him something wrapped in cloth. It was the captain's original name badge recovered from the cockpit. She told him the captain's family wanted him to have it. because on the worst day of their lives, he became the pilot their loved one would have been proud of. Malik looked toward the sky that evening as another plane crossed the clouds, just like he did as a little boy standing on a broken rooftop. Only now he wasn't watching dreams fly away. He was flying directly toward them. And this time, nothing could bring him back down. 5 years after the emergency landing that made him a national hero, Malik Carter's life looked nothing like the one he had left behind. He was now 18. He lived in a beautiful home with his mother and grandmother in a quiet neighborhood far from the violence of their old streets. His college education was fully funded. He was training at one of the most prestigious aviation academies in America. Millions of people knew his name. But fame had brought something no one warned him about: pressure. Everywhere Malik went, people expected perfection. Students wanted photos. News outlets followed his life. Airlines invited him to events. People called him the miracle pilot. But Malik often felt trapped by that title, because deep inside he was still the same kid who used to patch holes in his sneakers with glue. Still the boy who worried about his mother working too hard. Still someone haunted by what happened on Flight 728. At night, he often woke up drenched in sweat after reliving the screams, the falling plane, the alarms, the terrified faces, the moment he thought everyone would die because of him. His therapist told him surviving trauma didn't mean forgetting it, it meant learning how to live beyond it. But life became even more complicated when a major airline offered Malik something unimaginable. They wanted him to become the youngest commercial pilot spokesperson in company history. The contract was worth millions. His family celebrated. Friends told him this was the dream. But Malik hesitated. Something felt wrong. During one visit to his old neighborhood, he noticed almost nothing had changed. Kids still stood on dangerous street corners. Schools remained underfunded. Families still struggled. He saw younger versions of himself everywhere, and it broke his heart. One afternoon, Malik visited Mr. Raymond's youth center. The old mechanic had grown weaker with age. His hands shook. His breathing was slower, but his smile remained strong. That day, Mr. Raymond told Malik something that would change his life forever. He said success means very little if you're the only one who escapes. He reminded Malik that his miracle wasn't just surviving a plane crash. His miracle was being given a voice powerful enough to lift others. Weeks later, tragedy struck again. Mr. Raymond collapsed while teaching students and was rushed to the hospital. Doctors discovered advanced heart failure. He didn't have much time left. Malik sat beside his mentor's hospital bed, devastated. The man who taught him everything was fading fast. Mr. Raymond whispered that he had one final dream. He wanted every child in poor neighborhoods to have access to aviation education before he died. He wanted kids to see possibility instead of limitation. Days later, Mr. Raymond passed away peacefully. Malik was shattered. At the funeral, hundreds attended. Former students, pilots, mechanics, families, people whose lives had been changed by one humble man working from a small garage. Malik stood before the crowd struggling to hold back tears. Then he made a promise. He vowed to build the largest free aviation training program for underprivileged children in America, and he would name it after Mr. Raymond. People applauded politely, but many doubted him. Launching such a project required millions of dollars, land, equipment, staff, resources, horses. And Malik soon discovered powerful people wanted him to fail. A major corporate aviation company offered funding, but only if Malik agreed to make the program exclusive to wealthy private school students. He refused. Investors pulled out. Construction stopped. Critics mocked him online. Headlines claimed the young hero was wasting his career. Even some friends told him to accept reality. Then something unbelievable happened. Passengers from Flight 728 began reaching out. One by one, a surgeon, a retired military officer, a tech billionaire, teachers, construction workers, parents, people whose lives Malik saved years earlier, they remembered. And they wanted to help. The surgeon offered free medical care for students. The billionaire donated land. Construction companies volunteered labor. Pilots offered training hours. Teachers created free academic programs. What began as one boy's impossible promise turned into a national movement. 2 years later, the Raymond Carter Aviation Academy opened its doors. Thousands attended the grand opening. Media outlets from around the world covered the event. Children cried seeing real flight simulators. Parents hugged Malik. Teachers thanked him. And in the front row sat his mother and grandmother, proud beyond words. But the most emotional moment came when Malik entered a classroom and met a shy young girl named Aaliyah. She reminded him of himself. Quiet, brilliant, overlooked. She revealed she had built her own drone using scrap materials, but her family couldn't afford college. Malik smiled through tears. He handed her a full scholarship on the spot. Years passed. The academy expanded nationwide. Thousands of students became engineers, pilots, mechanics, and astronauts. Entire communities transformed. And then came one unforgettable moment. Malik boarded a flight as captain for the first time. All passengers applauded as he introduced himself over the speaker, but his voice cracked when he noticed someone sitting in first class, Emily, the flight attendant from Flight 728, now retired. She smiled proudly through tears, and beside her sat Aaliyah, now a licensed pilot herself. As the plane soared into the clouds, Malik looked out at the sky that once terrified him, and he realized something beautiful. The plane crash that nearly ended his life had actually revealed his purpose. Before this story ends, comment heroes rise if you believe one act of courage can change generations. And if this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can hear stories that inspire hope. Years later, when Malik's grandmother passed away peacefully at 93 years old, they found a note inside her Bible. It was addressed to Malik. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside were simple words that made him cry harder than ever before. It read, "I always knew you weren't meant to just watch planes in the sky. You were meant to help others fly too." By the time Malik looked up at the clouds again, he realized her words had already come true, and somewhere above the heavens, Mr. Raymond and his grandmother were smiling.